It's time for the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, retired Lieutenant Colonel, giving us all kinds of thoughts and insights on, well, things military. And we have a new conflict to talk about this week. Let's stop and put aside Ukraine and Russia for a moment, and let's talk about the details unfolding in the war with Israel and Iran. Now, I mean, hindsight's 2020, as I've pointed out in the program last couple of days. Donald Trump pulls our military personnel out of the region in advance of, well, the 61st day in his 60-day deadline he gave to Iran about negotiating a deal on their on their nuclear program. I guess perhaps he had a conversation at some point with Benjamin Netanyahu early on. I suspect Netanyahu had good intelligence that Iran might be up to something no good in a very short period of time, and it was time to stop the wheel spinning and take some action. Trump maybe suggested to him, well, at least give me a 60-day window of opportunity before all hell breaks loose to see if we can negotiate. Obviously, that did not work. Day 61, Israel unleashes an amazing thing to behold, much like the Ukrainians getting inside the interior of Russia and hiding those drones in spite of the being Russian territory. Obviously, Israel had a profound presence within the interior of Iran, was able to launch some very short-term short distance military strikes from within the interior. That's an amazing coup right there. And then now they apparently dominate the entire Iranian airspace and can fly free will and hit any target they want with pretty much great success. Long-winded start. Daniel Davis, welcome back, man. What's your take on this, and what's your reaction to all this?
Yeah, there's two separate things at play here that we need to address because they're very different in potential where we're going next. And one is just the operational art that you just mentioned there. And from a military tactical perspective, and this has been pretty impressive, again, because it was very highly effective. They were able to infiltrate apparently a pretty decent number of Mossad agents and other infiltrators, and perhaps even some insider folks, the Iranians who had been helping, etc. Just like the Ukraine side had some help from the Russian people who turned, and the other situation there. And so then they were able to take care of that on the ground. At the same time, they were coming in with strategic assets and operational and, an aircraft and all that. And it just absolutely devastated the initial Iranian defense. Allegedly, one or two F-35s were shot down. We still don't have confirmation of that. But even at that's out of 200 aircraft that flew the first night. That is a remarkable number to have been shot down, if it was. If not, obviously, it's even more than that. So in terms of how they started out, that's great. But there's another half of this coin, because we also see playing out graphically that the Iron Dome system and the multi-layered Israeli air defense system is not anywhere near as good as what people thought it was. We knew it wasn't. We've had on our show many times an expert that pointed this out in 2024. He very accurately predicted what Iran could do if it wanted to, and how it signaled in the past when we gave the Iron Dome credit for knocking down everything. But it turns out it only got some of the smaller stuff and the slower moving drones. But the missiles got through. And now that we see, while Israel has virtual air supremacy in Iran, Iran has virtual missile supremacy in Israel. There's very little that they can shoot down of those ballistic missiles, especially some of the more sophisticated ones that they have. So right now, you have both sides literally every night for 5 straight nights pummeling the other side there and causing tremendous damage, worse than we've ever seen in Israel in their existence. None of the wars have ever hit their cities the way this one is so far, and it's anybody's guess where it's going next. But with Trump leaving the G7 and coming back to convening just this morning, just hours from now, this National Security Council meeting, it's kind of ominous what could be coming next.
Yeah, and, I've been railing against this all morning. It's not the first time I've railed against it. The president is not allowed to declare war on his own. It takes congressional action, at least according to the Constitution I've got a copy of, Daniel. There has to be at least an authorization for use of military force, which the Senate has to approve. That hasn't been done yet. So I got the USS Nimitz apparently heading on over to the Middle East. We've got all these refueling airplane heading on over to the Middle East. So obviously the American military presence has been there and is now growing. So, is there going to be some sort of congressional action on this? I mean, I think it'll be beyond the pale. People screaming about the imperial presidency for Trump to just unilaterally join in the fray.
Right. Yeah. There's no question that there's lots of moving pieces here. In addition, there have been, by many reports, up to 30 aerial refueling jets leave from the United States and
Yeah.
move into the region. That's on top of everything else. You mentioned the B-2 bombers that have been at Diego Garcia for quite a long time, and then now on top of this, and Trump making some pretty boisterous and derogatory claims in on Air Force One last night about what may be coming, et cetera. I have huge problems with that. I don't think it's a good idea to do anyway because we should not get involved with this war. This is something
Right.
between Israel and Iran. If they want to do that, that's up to them. But I'm even more concerned with the lack of concern about almost anyone in the United States about the very issue you just mentioned here. We do not want a situation to where we literally give carte blanche to whoever's in the White House
Amen.
that they can have, because then you basically are a monarch, which is what we tried to prevent with the forming of the Constitution in the first place. And there's a couple of, I think, the Thomas Massey, and I think there's one Senator, Tim
Yeah.
Kaine, I believe, that are talking about that, but no one else is.
Yeah.
Nobody in the Democratic Party leadership, the Republican Party leadership, they have basically just handed it over to the commander in chief, and that is a dangerous place to be.
It is. It's not a question of whose ox is being gored. It's a question of whether or not they have the legal authority to do it in the first place. And you and I are eye to eye on that. And I read Congressman Massey's statement on the air this morning. I read Tim Kaine's statement on the air. Tim Kaine's gone down this road before. Back when Trump was originally president, it passed his resolution, which that in and of itself is comical. That you need to pass a piece of legislation to confirm what's already there, which is Congress has to
Yeah.
but it did go through and it got vetoed by the president. I mean, something's falling apart here on that one. And, I don't have a problem with Donald Trump, the man. I like most all of his policies, but this is something that's really quite concerning to me. And I'm glad that you agree with me and see eye to eye with me on that one, sir. Now
it's just a simple rendering of the Constitution that we're supposed to all follow. So
I know
it's not hard to see eye to eye with you on that.
They all held their hand up and swore an oath of office that included upholding the Constitution. Craziness. But then, there's a lot of elected people running around going, we need to get in this. We need to get in this. All right. Well, if you want to get into it, then, go ahead and declare war and make it official.
And one other thing, Brian, it's supposed to be hard to get into war. It was designed that way on purpose so that it's not easy. And we're seeing if this goes sideways, and my big beef tactically is that if we join offensively in this, then we put targets on the backs of our troops all over the Middle East.
Over.
And that same issue that I just showed you, where the THAAD system, the Patriots, the Iron Dome can't stop these missiles. There's even less protection for many of our smaller outposts in the Middle East. We would be absolutely powerless to stop this, and there would be a lot of American casualties, which we don't have to have any. But that's almost certain to come if we launch this war.
Well, that was something that Thomas Massey put up in a graphic along with his rejection of the idea that we should enter this conflict, the range of the Iranian missiles, and it encompasses a very large range, which includes all these operations you're talking about where American military personnel are. A really big problem for us over there. Now, insofar as providing them with weaponry, I mean, we provide countries all over the world with weaponry. If Israel wants the bunker busting bombs and we provide them to them, that's not us getting involved with boots on the ground. Hell, they bought F-35 from us. I don't really recognize the distinction between them. Could we, and I don't know if you have any information on the depth at which these centrifuges happen to be within that mountain, but if they had those types of technology, those bunker busting type bombs, could they reach them or do enough damage that it would put the centrifuges out of operation?
Yeah, that's the one key category that Israel doesn't have. The Fordo plant. That seems to be the central piece in this whole issue because it is buried by some accounts half a kilometer under the ground. And the Israelis, with all their assets, don't have anything big enough to carry these big bunker buster bombs. So they don't have the number one, but they don't have the carriers either. That is the B-2 bomber. That's why we have those in the region. And these 30,000-pound bombs, just spectacular destructive ability, but it's not clear at all that they have the ability to penetrate that deep. So it may not even work. But unless the U.S. personally flies, that's something we can't give to Israel. They don't have the ability to use it. So, and I know that Benjamin Netanyahu wants desperately to have that in there. But again, the minute that you allow that, and then we've offensively, then you're almost certainly signing the death warrants for American soldiers that otherwise won't die.
Well, and that would be akin then to what we got going on in Ukraine, which is operating those sophisticated missiles that need American personnel with security clearance to use. So, effectively boots on the ground in the form of operating equipment that Ukraine has physically present in its country.
Right, and so far we have done that there, and Putin, although he rattled his saber a little bit, has not taken any action. He's chosen not to because he doesn't want to start a war with the U.S. The difference in this situation here is that that could be fatal for the Iranian regime. So they would have no reason to constrain themselves, whereas Russia does because they don't want to get into a war against a nuclear power if they can avoid it. But in this situation, if it's like your regime is about to be destroyed, then they would use it, or they would likely use it.
Well, real quick before we part company today, Daniel Davis, I just could go on for hours with you today. I had an energy expert on. We were talking about the Iranian nuclear program. They've enriched up to 60%. You only need effectively 3 or 4% enrichment to run a domestic energy generating operation. But even if they don't have a triggering mechanism, they build a bomb, need to be able to blow it up for a real thermonuclear bomb. They could easily make a dirty bomb. They just pack it full of the 60% enriched uranium and just blow it up inside Tel Aviv or some other Israeli occupied. Do you see Iran reaching that level of desperation under the current circumstance?
If Benjamin Netanyahu makes good on his what he's saying right now, we may go after Ayatollah Khomeini. If they start literally going after the top, like they did against Hassan Nasrallah with Hezbollah,
Yeah.
because I think that Israel said, well, we did it before and it worked out great. They actually went to ground. That nearly ended the threat right there. And there may be some thoughts that let's do the same thing to Ayatollah Khomeini. That's what Netanyahu said yesterday. That would end the war. It wouldn't expand it. I think that is a bad reading of the situation because there are a bunch of other senior officials. You haven't killed, even a small percentage, but there are still a bunch of the senior clerics around, and there would be somebody else to pick up the table. And it's very unlikely to me that they would do what Hezbollah did. I think they would do the opposite, and then they would start just throwing in the kitchen sink and everything else. They would have no reason to withhold it.
Yeah, scary situation if we go down that road. Daniel Davis, Deep Dive, find his podcasts online and enjoy what he has to say throughout the week. I always look forward to this, Daniel. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Always a pleasure.
My pleasure too, my friend.